The hum of my office was a familiar comfort. Computers whirring softly, the faint clack of keyboards, and the occasional murmur of my team troubleshooting a client's network. I leaned back in my chair, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across my desk. It was a quiet day at Miller IT Solutions, the small but steady business my father had built and handed over to me after I left the Marines. Life in this sleepy little town wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, or so I thought. My phone buzzed against the wooden desk, rattling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Matt. That was unusual. Matt wasn't the type to call out of the blue. He preferred quick texts, usually about grabbing a beer or complaining about his latest fishing trip. I frowned, setting my mug down, and swiped to answer. "Jake, man, you need to hear this." Matt's voice came through, tight and unsteady, like he was holding something back. My stomach twisted instinctively. "Where are you right now?" "In the office," I said, leaning forward, my free hand gripping the armrest of my chair. "What's going on?" Matt exhaled sharply, the sound crackling through the line. "It's Sarah. She's at Blue Haven, the bar downtown. And you're not going to like this." Blue Haven, a dive bar with sticky floors and neon lights, the kind of place locals went to drown their weekdays. Sarah wasn't a regular there, or at least I didn't think she was. My mind raced, trying to piece together why Matt sounded so rattled. "What's she doing?" I asked, my voice steady but my pulse starting to climb. "She's dancing," Matt said, hesitating. I almost laughed. Dancing wasn't a crime. But then his tone dropped, low and serious. "It's more than that, Jake. She's all over some guy. Hands everywhere, right in the middle of the damn place. And Chris and Emma, they're there too, cheering her on like it's a show." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, everything went quiet. The office noise, the hum of the air conditioning, even my own breathing. Sarah, my wife of 4 years, the woman I'd built a life with. Chris and Emma, friends I'd known since high school, people I'd trusted, and some guy. My grip tightened around the phone until my knuckles whitened. "Who's the guy?" I managed to ask, my voice colder than I intended. Matt paused, then said, "I think it's Nick. You know, her ex from way back, the one she dated in college." Nick. The name sliced through me like a blade. I remembered him, tall, cocky, the kind of guy who thought charm could cover up a lack of spine. Sarah had told me about him years ago, how he'd dumped her without a word and left her heartbroken. She'd sworn he was ancient history. Apparently, history had a way of repeating itself. "You sure?" I asked, already standing, grabbing my jacket from the back of my chair. "Pretty damn sure," Matt replied. "I'm still here. I can send you the address if you—" "Do it." I cut him off, my tone clipped. A second later, my phone pinged with the location. Blue Haven wasn't far, just a 10-minute drive. "I'm on my way." "Jake, listen." Matt started, but I hung up before he could finish. I didn't need advice or pity. I needed to see it for myself. The drive was a blur. Traffic lights bled into streaks of red and green, the hum of my truck's engine a dull roar in my ears. My mind churned, replaying Matt's words, picturing Sarah with Nick, Chris and Emma laughing, like my life was some cheap comedy. I didn't speed. Years in the Marines had drilled discipline into me, but my hands gripped the steering wheel so hard I half expected it to crack. Blue Haven loomed ahead, its neon sign flickering against the dusk sky. The parking lot was half full, pickup trucks and beat-up sedans scattered around like they'd been abandoned. I pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, staring at the entrance. The bass from inside thumped faintly, vibrating through the windshield. My chest felt tight, like a coiled spring ready to snap. I stepped out, the cool evening air hitting my face as I strode toward the door. Matt was waiting just inside, his broad frame slouched against the wall, his expression grim. He didn't say anything, just nodded toward the dance floor. I followed his gaze, and there she was. Sarah, my Sarah. Her dark hair spilled over her shoulders as she pressed herself against Nick, his hands sliding down her hips, their bodies swaying to the music like they'd done this 100 times. She turned her head and I saw it, her lips meeting his, A slow, deliberate kiss, his fingers tangling in her hair. She wasn't pulling away. She wasn't resisting. She was lost in it. Around them, Chris and Emma stood with drinks in hand, grinning like idiots. Chris clapped Nick on the shoulder, laughing, while Emma leaned in to whisper something to him, her eyes glinting with amusement. The rest of the bar didn't seem to care. Strangers drinking, talking, ignoring the spectacle. But to me, it was like the world had narrowed to that one spot, that one betrayal. Something inside me broke loose. I didn't think. I moved. My boots hit the sticky floor with purpose, cutting through the crowd until I was standing right in front of them. Sarah turned, her movements slow, almost casual, like she'd been expecting me. Her eyes widened for a split second, but then she smiled, a lazy, unbothered smile that made my blood boil. "Jake," she said, her voice light, like she was greeting me at home after work. "Didn't expect to see you here." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "Don't," I said, my voice low and controlled, though every word felt like it was carved from ice. "Don't even try it, Sarah. You're not sorry, so save your breath." Her smile faltered, just for a moment. Nick shifted beside her, stepping forward like he thought he could play hero. "Hey man, you got a problem?" he asked, his tone sharp but his stance uncertain. I turned my head, locking eyes with him. "Yeah, I do," I said, stepping closer until I was in his space. "My problem's with her, and now it's with you. Stay out of it or you'll regret it." Nick hesitated, his bravado flickering. He wasn't stupid. He could see I wasn't bluffing. Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Let's go," she muttered, but I wasn't done. "How long?" I asked, my gaze snapping back to her. She looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, then met my eyes again, her expression hardening. 2 months, she said quietly, "since he came back. 2 months, 2 months of lies, of her coming home to me, smiling, pretending." I let out a slow breath, my jaw tight. "You want a divorce?" I said, my voice steady. "You've got it, but don't you dare come near my house. Not for your stuff, not for anything." She opened her mouth, but I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there with Nick, Chris, and Emma watching in silence. The night air hit me again as I stepped outside, but it didn't cool the fire burning in my chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The drive back from Blue Haven felt longer than it should have. The town's quiet streets stretched out under the dim glow of streetlights, but my mind was a storm. Sarah's lazy smile, Nick's hands on her, Chris and Emma laughing like my life was a punchline. I didn't head home right away. Instead, I pulled into the empty parking lot of Miller IT Solutions, the only place I could think straight. The office was dark, save for the faint blue flicker of a monitor someone had left on. I let myself in, the familiar smell of coffee grounds and electronics grounding me as I sank into my chair. I stared at the desk, the framed photo of me and Sarah still sitting there from better days. Her laughing at a county fair, my arm around her. It felt like a relic now, a lie captured in glass. I grabbed it, tossed it into the trash can with a dull thud, and leaned back, running a hand over my face. 2 months. She'd been lying to me for 2 months, coming home with that same soft smile, sleeping beside me while she planned her escape with Nick. The betrayal wasn't just her, it was Chris and Emma too, people I'd called friends for over a decade. They'd picked their side, and it wasn't mine. My phone buzzed again. Matt, probably checking in. I ignored it for now and pulled up my contacts instead, scrolling until I found Tom Reed's number. Tom was the best lawyer in town, a grizzled ex-Marine like me who didn't mess around when it came to winning. It was late, but I didn't care. I dialed, and after 2 rings, his gravelly voice came through. "Jake Miller," he said, a hint of amusement in his tone. "What's got you calling me at this hour?" "Sarah's cheating," I said bluntly, no preamble. "Caught her tonight with her ex, Nick. She wants a divorce. I need you to make sure she doesn't get a damn thing she doesn't deserve." Tom let out a low whistle. "Well, hell, that's a mess. You got anything in your favor?" "The house is mine," I said, leaning forward, elbows on the desk. "Bought it before we married. Title's in my name only. The business is my dad's. On paper, I'm just an employee. She can't touch either." "Smart man," Tom said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "What about joint accounts?" I grinned, a cold edge to it. Stopped by the bank on my way here. Drained them. Everything's in my personal account now. She's got nothing to grab. Tom chuckled. You're a step ahead already. She'll fight for alimony. You know that, right? Let her try, I said, my voice firm. She makes more than me. Works at that fancy marketing firm downtown. I want this airtight, Tom. No loopholes. Consider it done, he replied. I'll draft the papers tomorrow. Grounds? Adultery, I said, the word bitter on my tongue. I've got a witness. Matt saw it all at Blue Haven. Probably half the bar did too. Good enough, Tom said. I'll call you when it's ready. Hang tight, Jake. We'll bury her. I hung up, a small weight lifting off my chest. Tom was ruthless, and I trusted him to handle it. But Sarah was only part of the equation. Chris and Emma, they'd crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I turned to my computer, pulling up the client dashboard for Miller IT. There they were, Chris's manufacturing outfit and Emma's accounting firm, both running on our cloud services, both using our leased hardware, and both of their contracts expired 2 weeks ago. They'd ignored the renewal notices, 3 emails over the past month, all sitting unread in their inboxes. I'd let it slide, figuring we'd sort it out later because we were friends. Not anymore. Their businesses relied on us. Data storage, networking, tech support. Without it, they'd be scrambling with paper and pencils like it was 1995. I leaned back, fingers steepled, a plan forming. I wasn't going to renew those contracts. I'd give them a heads up, then pull the plug. Legal, clean, and devastating. I dialed Mark, my client manager, who picked up with a yawn. Jake, it's late, man. What's up? Chris and Emma, I said, keeping my tone even. Their contracts expired. I want formal notices sent tomorrow. 2 days to back up their data, then we wipe it and cut them off. No renewals. Mark paused, then let out a low laugh. Damn, what did they do to piss you off? Long story, I said. Just make it professional, but mention the ignored renewal emails. I want them to know they had their chance. You got it, Mark said, his keyboard clicking in the background. They're gonna freak when they realize they're screwed. That's the idea, I replied, a faint smirk tugging at my lips. Thanks, Mark. I hung up and stood, stretching my arms. The office felt quieter now, the anger simmering down to a steady resolve. Sarah, Chris, Emma, they'd all underestimated me, thought I'd roll over and take it. They were wrong. Before I left, I grabbed my keys and headed home. The house was dark when I walked in, the silence heavy but not unwelcome. Sarah's stuff was still scattered around, her jacket on the couch, a pair of heels by the door. I didn't touch it yet. That could wait. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, sat on the porch, and let the night air settle my nerves. My phone buzzed again. Matt, this time with a text. You okay? Saw you leave the bar? She's still here with that asshole. I typed back, I'm fine. She's his problem now. Thanks for the heads up. Matt replied, anytime, man. Let me know if you need anything. I set the phone down, took a sip of bourbon, and stared out at the stars. Sarah wanted a divorce? Fine. She'd get it, along with a hard lesson in consequences. Chris and Emma would learn too. I wasn't the guy they could stab in the back and walk away from. Not anymore. The bourbon burned going down, but it felt good. Tomorrow I'd start dismantling their worlds, piece by piece. Tonight I'd let the quiet sink in, fueling me for what came next. The morning after Blue Haven felt different, like the air itself carried a new weight. I woke early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon, and made coffee in a kitchen that still echoed with Sarah's absence. Her mug sat untouched on the counter, a silent reminder of the life I was shedding. I didn't linger on it. Today wasn't about mourning, it was about action. Tom had texted me late last night. Papers ready? Meet me at 9. Mark had confirmed the emails to Chris and Emma were sent. The pieces were moving, and I was ready to watch them fall. I met Tom at his office, a cramped space downtown with stacks of files and a perpetually half-empty coffee pot. He slid a thick envelope across his desk, his weathered face creasing into a grin. Divorce petition, grounds of adultery, he said. Witness statement from Matt included. She won't wiggle out of this one. I flipped through the pages, clean, precise, every detail locked down. She'll fight it, I said, leaning back in the chair. She'll want alimony, maybe even a piece of the business. Tom snorted. She can try. Your house predates the marriage. Business is your dad's, and your salary's peanuts compared to hers. I've got pay stubs to prove it. $1,200 a month from Miller IT. She's the breadwinner, Jake. If anything, we could push for you to get support. I raised an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at my lips. Think we can pull that off? With her cheating on record? Hell yeah, Tom said, tapping the desk. Judge will eat it up. Small town like this, infidelity still carries weight. Make it happen, I said, sliding the envelope back. Serve her today. Tom nodded. Philip's on it. She'll have it by noon. I left his office feeling lighter, the bourbon from last night replaced by a cold, steady focus. Philip, Tom's go-to process server, was a pro. Quiet, efficient, with a knack for timing. I could picture it. Sarah at her marketing firm, schmoozing clients over lunch. Only to freeze when Philip handed her the envelope. No denial, no excuses. Just the truth in black and white. By midday, I was back at Miller IT, sipping coffee and watching the clock. Mark poked his head into my office, a grin spreading across his face. Chris just called, sounded like a man drowning, yelling about his servers being down, data gone. I told him the contract expired, per the email. He didn't take it well. I chuckled, leaning back. What did he say? Called you every name in the book, Mark said, shrugging. Said you can't do this, that he'll sue. I reminded him he ignored 3 renewal notices. Legally, we're golden. Good, I said, tapping my fingers on the desk. Emma? Her email bounced back. Spam filter, probably, Mark replied. But I called her office. She's freaking out, too. Said her client's tax files are wiped. Begged for an extension. No extensions, I said, my voice firm. They had their shot. Mark nodded, a glint of amusement in his eyes. You're cold, man. I like 16 like it. I didn't renew their contracts because they didn't deserve it. Chris and Emma had stood there at Blue Haven, laughing while my marriage burned. Now their businesses were crumbling. Chris's production line stalled without inventory logs. Emma's accounting firm scrambling to reconstruct years of records. They'd assumed I'd bend over backward for them, like I owed them something. They were wrong. My phone rang an hour later. Sarah. I let it ring twice, then answered, keeping my tone flat. Yeah? You bastard, she hissed, her voice shrill. You're trying to ruin me. I saw the papers. No house, no business. Nothing. Good afternoon, Sarah, I said, stirring my coffee casually. You lost your claim the second you cheated. You can't do this, she snapped. I deserve half. You deserve what you earn, I said coolly. Talk to Nick if you need cash. Maybe he'll buy you that dream life you wanted with my money. Her breathing hitched, furious. You'll regret this, Jake. Already got a restraining order on you and your boyfriend, I cut in. Stay away from my house and the business, or you'll regret it more. She started to yell again, but I hung up, setting the phone down with a satisfying clack. The coffee was still warm, and I took a sip, savoring the quiet victory. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Brandon, an old buddy who worked at Sarah's firm. She's a wreck, he said, chuckling. Stormed into my office after the papers hit, white as a ghost. Took the day off. Expected that, I said, smiling. Thanks for the update. Anytime, Brandon replied. You're playing this smart, Jake. I hung up, picturing Sarah unraveling, her perfect image cracking as whispers spread through town. Nick wasn't faring better. I'd heard through Matt that his boss, Mr. Patel, fired him that morning after catching wind of the scandal. No reference, no prospects, just a one-way ticket out of town. By evening, I was home, the house still cluttered with Sarah's things. I didn't rush to clear it out. Let it sit as a reminder of what I'd overcome. I poured a beer and stepped onto the porch, the sky streaked with orange and pink. Chris and Emma's businesses were in chaos. Sarah's world was shrinking, and Nick was running. It wasn't glee I felt, not exactly. It was justice, slow and deliberate, settling into place. I took a long pull from the beer, the cold glass steady in my hand. The war wasn't over. Court was still ahead. But I'd won this round. Sarah would fight. Chris and Emma would scramble. But they'd already lost more than they knew. I set the bottle down, exhaling into the crisp air. Tomorrow I'd finish what I'd started. The courtroom was quieter than I'd expected, the hum of the air conditioning blending with the soft rustle of papers. It was 3 months after Blue Haven, and the divorce was finally wrapping up. Sarah sat across the room, her jaw tight, her lawyer fidgeting beside her. She'd fought hard, claiming the house, a chunk of the business, alimony, but Tom had dismantled every argument. The house was mine, bought before the marriage. The business belonged to my dad, with me as a salaried employee pulling just $1,200 a month. Her infidelity, backed by Matt's testimony and bar rumors, sealed the deal. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, peered over her glasses. Given the evidence, I award no marital assets to Miss Sarah Miller, she said, her voice crisp. Furthermore, due to her higher income and the dissolution caused by her actions, Mr. Miller is granted spousal support of $300 per month for 1 year, or until he remarries. Sarah's head snapped up, her face flushing red. She whispered something furious to her lawyer, but he just shook his head. I kept my expression blank, though inside I felt a quiet triumph. Tom clapped me on the shoulder as we left, grinning. Told you we'd bury her. Appreciate it, I said, shaking his hand. Drinks on me later. Outside, Sarah stormed up to me, her heels clicking against the pavement. You think this is over? She spat. You set me up. I shrugged, meeting her glare. You set yourself up, Sarah. Enjoy your fresh start with Nick. She flinched, then turned and stalked off. I watched her go, feeling nothing but relief. She was free to crash and burn, out of my life for good. A week later, I got the final decree in the mail. Legally, I was Jake Miller again. No strings, no baggage. The house felt different now, emptier, but not in a bad way. I'd cleared out Sarah's stuff, donating most of it to a thrift shop. The silence was peaceful, a blank slate I could fill however I wanted. First thing I did? I drove 2 towns over to a breeder and picked up 2 German Shepherd pups, Max and Bella. Max was a bold little guy, always charging ahead, while Bella was sharper, watching everything with bright, curious eyes. They bounded into the house like they'd always belonged there, and just like that, the quiet turned lively. I'd always wanted dogs, but Sarah hated the idea, said they'd ruin her furniture. Well, her furniture was gone, and Max and Bella were my new roommates. They followed me everywhere, sleeping by my bed, trailing me on morning runs, chewing up the occasional sock when I wasn't looking. Their energy brought a warmth I hadn't realized I'd missed, a simple kind that didn't come with lies or agendas. Then there was Kate. I met her a month later at the dog park, a sprawling field where Max and Bella loved to burn off steam. She was sitting on a bench, sipping coffee, her own German Shepherd, Rusty, wrestling a stick twice his size. My 2 spotted him and bolted over, turning it into a chaotic game of tug-of-war. I jogged up, ready to apologize, but Kate just laughed, a warm, easy sound that caught me off guard. Looks like they're starting a team, she said, brushing a strand of brown hair from her face. I smirked, catching my breath. Guess so. Sorry if they're bothering him. Don't be, she said, waving a hand. Rusty's having a blast. We got talking, about the dogs at first, then about random things. Her job as a graphic designer, my time in the Marines, the best trails around town. She was sharp, funny, with a laid-back confidence that didn't feel forced. Nothing like the games I dealt with before. We stayed there an hour, watching the dogs play, and when she left, she gave me her number with a casual, "Text me if they want a rematch." I did. One text turned into a few, then coffee dates, then hikes with Max, Bella, and Rusty in tow. It wasn't some grand romance, no fireworks or drama, just a slow, steady connection that fit. We'd spend Sundays cooking dinner, the dogs hovering for scraps, or sit on my porch with a beer and her coffee, watching the sun dip below the trees. It was easy, real, and after everything, that was enough. Sarah's fallout trickled back to me through the grapevine. She'd lost her job, too many whispers about Blue Haven, and Nick had bailed after a blowout fight. Matt said he'd seen her packing up her apartment, headed out of town. Chris and Emma weren't faring better. Chris's business folded under lost contracts. Emma faced lawsuits from clients over missing records. They'd tried calling me once, begging for help, But I let it go to voicemail. Their bridges were ash now. One evening I got a knock at the door. It was Helen, Sarah's mom, her face lined with fatigue. I let her in, and she sat on the couch, smoothing her skirt. "Sarah's a mess," she said softly. "She's leaving tomorrow." I nodded, leaning back in my chair. Not surprised. She burned everything here. Helen sighed. "She did. I'm not here to defend her, Jake. What she did was wrong." "I know," I said, my tone even. "I'm not sorry for how it played out." "You shouldn't be," she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You were good to her." She threw it away. We sat in silence for a moment, then she stood. "Take care, Jake. You'll always be family to me." "Thanks, Helen," I said, walking her out. It was the last thread to that old life, snipped clean. That night Kate came over, Rusty bounding in behind her. We grilled burgers, the dogs sprawled out on the porch, and as the stars came out, she leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. "You seem different lately," she said, glancing up. "Happier." I thought about it, Max and Bella snoring nearby. The house mine again, her beside me. "I am," I said, and meant it. The chaos was gone, replaced by something solid. Life had balanced out, and for the first time in years, I liked where it was headed.